Hello, and welcome to another WH40K Shortcast. Since the previous one was quite well received, I thought I'd do another one, and this time I'd actually have a specific topic instead of why, in my personal opinion, the Guard are so interesting, what makes them interesting. I thought today I'd talk about 3 regiments that I find interesting. And today I'm going to be talking about the first ever regiment imagined up by G-Dubs, the Valhalla Ice Warriors. Then I'm going to be talking about the Tanith first, and then I'm going to be talking about the Death Corps. These are selected due to the ease of access to lore for these 3 regiments. Let's start with the Valhalla Ice Warriors. So, as with all notable and iconic Imperial Guard regiments, Valhallans come from a very specific kind of world. In this case, the Valhallan Ice Warriors come from the planet Valhalla, which is basically a frozen ball of ice. So that has shaped both their culture and how they fight. First of all, they live primarily underground on the planet to protect themselves from the cold, and they have little access to food or supplies, and they are first of all, they feel at home in cold, and secondly, they are quite stoic, even against overwhelming odds. So, one of the things that again makes the Imperial Guard interesting is how they react to shit situations. The other thing that kind of is notable about the Valhallans is that they have a deep hatred against the Orcs more than any other Xenos race, because their world was one of the many worlds that at some point came under attack by an Orc invasion. But the Valhallans stood the line and eventually managed to overcome the Orc menace, although there's still stories on the planet of Orcs being found in the ice and thawed out only for them to attack again. So they are quite good at close range combat. One could say that they're quite good at urban combat as well. Most of all, they are a very defensive force. They are very good at turtling. They are also trained to fight in dense formations, and they use massive amounts of artillery. So they are, they're very basic in many ways, but that's to be expected because, like I said, they were the first regiment. Then getting into the part of the lore that is very much accessible, and this is one of those moments where I'm going to refer to some reading. And if you have the ability, if you do have the access, I recommend reading 1, Ice Guard by Steve Lyons, which is a very good novel about the Valhalla Ice Warriors. But another series of books that are, of course, I don't think this comes as a surprise, but another very good source of lore and actually of the fluff around the lore would be to read the Caiaphas Cain series, due to the fact that Commissar Caiaphas Cain is, for a large part of his service to the Imperium, attached to the 597th Regiment of the Valhallans. There's quite a lot of interesting information that you can get, not only of Cain as a character, but also of how the Valhallans work, how their little culture works, stuff like that, and that is the thing that, once again, another part of what makes them interesting is because they have a unique culture of their own. So to learn more about the fluff, to learn more about the actual hard lore, you can just read wikis, but to learn more about the fluff I recommend reading, like I said, the Caiaphas Cain series and Ice Guard by Steve Lyons. Then we can move on to the Tanith. So the Tanith first is probably one of the better known Imperial Guard regiments, mainly due to the fact that they are part of one of the cult books or cult book series when it comes to the Imperial Guard, the Gaunt's Ghost, or Gaunt's Ghosts rather, book series. And so this makes them already interesting. They are tied to something quite large, quite substantial and quite established. But they are also, well, why is it the Tanith first? And more importantly, why is it the Tanith first and only? So originally, there were going to be 3 regiments raised from Tanith. The Tanith first, the Tanith second, and the Tanith third. However, during the time when the regiments were to be shipped, during the founding of the regiments, the world of Tanith, which was a lush, verdant world, came under attack by a chaos fleet that basically destroyed the planet, and it killed most of the populace. And their commander, Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt, had 2 options. He could either stand his ground and lead his men to a glorious defeat in the name of the Emperor, or he could do the hard thing, and he could turn his forces around and get as many people off the planet as possible. And that is what he did. So he ordered the surviving Tanith guardsmen off-world, and in doing so gained their resentment for basically forever. Because even though he saved them, the world was doomed and they were the last of a dying people. Which is a little bit, that's a very hard position to come from for a commander. But it already sets the tone, because then the story is about, first of all, it's about loss, it's about discovery, it's about redemption in many ways. It's about how to come back from something as substantial as that. And of course, the fact of the matter is, since there was only the Tanith first and only left after this, they have been reinforced by other forces during their campaigns. Most notably after a battle, after the campaign known as the Siege of Vervenhive, many of the survivors of Vervenhive actually joined up with the Ghosts, and again this brought in a new culture into the Tanith. So yet again it adds another layer of why they are an interesting force. Because first of all, we have this already very well established culture, which is based around, the Tanith are basically a mixture of Scots, Irishmen and Welsh people. And they already had this very established culture of being stealthy, having silver knives, and basically being stoic in the face of loss. And then they are joined by this new culture of hivers and people who weren't drafted into the Guard, people who joined because they had nowhere to go. And that, of course, that causes resentment. And that is, again, one of the things that it deepens the story. It gives us more access into what's the culture, why is the culture, how does the culture work, how deep does the culture go. So, moving onto the nitty-gritty, who are the Tanith and how do they fight? Well, the Tanith are basically the unrivaled scouts, marksmen, and stealth troops of the Imperium. They have the uncanny ability to vanish from any terrain. They are crack shots, and their snipers are therefore even better. But they are all crack shots, and they are one of the, well, they are known for their camo cloaks and their woad tattoos. And again, it's like they are an interesting force because they are so heavily cultured in the normally quite uniformly presented Imperial Guard. This is once again one of those forces that show their culture very, very definitely, and that is another one of those interesting markers. The word interesting has been used so much that it has lost all meaning, which in itself is already interesting. So, finally, and definitely, well, before we get into the Krieg, I'm going to once again, to get more of the fluff, to get the actual story of the Tanith first and only, I recommend reading Gaunt's Ghosts. The entire series. There's going to be a new book coming out this December, God willing. Well, God Emperor of Mankind willing. And I personally have started rereading the series just to reacquaint myself and get myself in the frame of mind for the new book. It should be very interesting, and hopefully it will be. How could it not be? So, finishing up and coming to a close, we're going to take the Death Corps. And they are one of the more enigmatic forces in the Imperial Guard. And one of the reasons for that is because they are cold, unfeeling, and they wear gas masks all the time. They show no emotion, either on the emotional level or on the physical level. They are pragmatical to the fullest, and they are just one of the more faceless regiments on the surface. And it would be easy to think, they are basically a boring force. Maybe they are an edgy force even, because they are just these quiet, stoic, unfeeling robots wearing gas masks. And to get into why and get into that, we need to look at what is once again, they are very iconic, they are very defined. What's wrong with their world? Well, the world of Krieg is, to put it bluntly, fucked. It's fucking fucked. The reason why it's so massively fucked is because during a time, one of the leaders of the world declared themselves independent from declared the world independent from the Imperium and renounced the Emperor. So this caused a civil war to break out. Basically, the world was quite the civil war was going very badly for the non-rebels, for the established forces, and the last hive to fall was a hive called Ferrograd, which was under the command of Colonel Jerton, who led the 83rd Imperial Guard Regiment. His orders were to not let Krieg fall, but he had no troops, he had nothing to effectively establish this. He was surrounded on all sides, fighting a war he could not win for the Emperor. And for the Emperor, he made a very drastic decision, and he decided that the world would either belong to the Emperor or it would belong to no one. And on the day of the Feast of the Emperor's Ascension, Colonel Jerton basically launched an atomic cleansing that would become known as the Purging. So for days, Krieg was ravaged by nuclear fire, which basically destroyed the ecosystem, caused a nuclear winter, which is what you pray for when you're patrolling the Mojave. But even this wasn't enough to end the Civil War. In the nuclear wasteland left behind, the survivors still fought on, and they were forced to live in underground bunkers, and it got into a very, very weird state of, well, the world's fucked, let's go underground and keep fighting. So, even after the nuclear fire devastated their world, destroyed their ecosystem, radiated everything that they knew, they fought on for 500 years. It took the loyalist troops 500 years to reclaim Krieg for the imperial rule. And that's where the Krieg come from. That's where the Kriegsmen come from. So, to repay for this, the Kriegsmen are one of the many regiments that are basically in penance, and they do what they do to repay a debt to the Imperium. Another notable is, of course, the Vostroyans. So, by order of the High Lords of Terror, the entire planet of Krieg only has one purpose. They do not produce metal, they do not produce ships. The only thing that they produce for the Imperium is men. So, for this purpose, their tithe is set very, very high. They have the maximum tithe for the planet's population, and they supply over 50 million men to fight and die for the Imperium every single year. And to do this, they've been given access to many different kinds of artificial growth and weird technological birthing techniques, the use of eugenics, really strict mutation control, and of course the most important part, which is the mental conditioning, the reason why they are so, well, emotionless. The training of a Kriegsman starts basically from birth, not only due to the fact that they live on a planet which is a nuclear hellscape, but their mind is taken and broken purposefully so that it could be remade stronger. They have absolute faith in the Imperium and in the Emperor, and they exist in this what could be called a cult of sacrifice. Their role in life is to die for the Emperor, and to further distance them from humanity. And this is the thing that, once again, the Imperial Guard are interesting because of their humanity. So why are the Kriegsmen interesting despite having been stripped of their humanity? And that's not only the dilemma, why are they interesting despite having so much humanity taken away from them, but also, why does having their humanity taken from them make them more interesting? Like I said in the previous podcast, the Space Marines aren't quite as interesting due to the fact that they have no human fear, they have no human emotions, they know no fear. Neither do the Kriegsmen, but why are they interesting where Space Marines are not? And to answer that question, there's a very good book by Steve Lyons again called, well, I mean, there's two books, and I recommend reading both if you have access to them. So the books are Down Amongst the Dead Men, which is a short story having to do with how the Kriegsmen are trained. And then the book that I recommend you read if you can get your hands on it, should be a bit available on Amazon, both as a hardcover, well, probably as a soft cover, or an audiobook, or an ebook. Also available in the Honor Imperialis omnibus, Dead Men Walking. And Dead Men Walking is the story of a mining planet that falls under Necron invasion. And Dead Men Walking gives us a very good view into how and why, first of all, how the Krieg operate on the battlefield, but how the way of the Death Corps could also be not something that diminishes you, but something that protects you, how it's another shield, how it's another version of the armor of contempt, how it could even be a willful departure from feelings, from emotions, so that you can pursue the duty that you know you have to perform. It's a very interesting dichotomy, because at the same time they are very faceless, but yet they still have a lot of depth of character due to that fact. Or at least in my opinion. So, I think I've rambled on long enough, and once again, thank you very much for joining me for this. And if you wish to, first of all, if you wish for me to talk about a specific topic, I will be trying to get co-hosts in for future episodes or future podcasts. But if you do wish to see more of these, please leave a comment down below, like, share, do all that stuff. But most importantly, leave a comment down below if you like these, and if you have something specific that you'd like to hear talked about. And most importantly, remember in that this is not about this isn't about hard law, this is more about fluff and more about the exploration of the law through actual discussion. So, one last thank you, and for now, goodbye.